Here's how to manage a large amount of inputs. As a copywriter or a marketer, you need to handle your inputs so that you can create better outputs. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. Whether you're doing research for a client sales letter or you're doing research for content on your own website, it is very important to be able to organize the information inputs that you have. See, today we can go online and we've got the internet, and we've got so much information coming into us and available to us. It's not like the olden days where you had to go to a library and you had one book at a time. And it's very easy when you're working on a project. I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but you're working on a project and you get distracted. You had every intention to write that sales letter, to write that article, to write that campaign piece for a client, and it just hasn't got done because there was some really good information on a website. So I'm going to give you a few tips to organize information and to get you really focused on the outcomes of the activity itself. So for research, I do collect the websites of different credible sources. So I'm not going to go out and research my primary sources when I'm looking for details for a claim. I'm going to find a secondary source that fits the need of the claim. Then I'm going to research my primary source. Now, I'm doing this because the primary sources can be vast and it can be hard to get through a lot of reports and studies to get that. So I'm going to let other people, I'm going to let artificial intelligence, I'm going to let other tools go through all that data, and then I'm going to pull it in an extract. And then I'm going to validate the extract because I do want to have accurate information and I do want to use the primary source for my client. But I'm going to save a lot of time by starting kind of in the middle. So I have a claim, I want to support or reject the claim. I find some abstract or meta information. And then from the meta information, I go find my primary source. Now, you're going to ask about tools. Well, one of the tools that I use is Feedly. And by the way, there's going to be a link below with a bunch of other tools. But one of the tools I use is Feedly, where I can take the different feeds from different types of sites, different types of search criteria that I tend to do the same search over and over. I can put it into Feedly, and then I can search the headlines and the meta information in order to narrow out or narrow down into what I'm looking for. And then I can go back to search engines. Search engines is another one of those tools to find the primary source. Now, what is a primary source? Primary source is going to be something that's researched, something is credible. If you're writing a health advertisement and you don't have doctor peer-reviewed studies of something that you're calling back, then you don't have the same claim or the same value as is necessary if you have like an FDA filing. Let's get back on the topic of organizing information. I got called away from somebody visiting. Okay, so again, when you're organizing your inputs, you want to use proxy information or meta information to get you narrowed down or zeroed in on specific topics. Then you go back and you get primary information, which is direct from the source. It's highly credible. This is kind of a time-saving function. You can use tools like Feedly or a newsreader or even Google Alerts to collect information. Now, by the time you listen to this, those tools might not be available. The key is you want to set up search phrases or Boolean searches, queries, to find key information rather than trying to consume and read large volumes of information. If you specialize in a client, sure, you're going to have that specialization. You're going to know some of these things, but everything you do for a client needs to be sourced and evidenced so that you can have a claim. So if you have, if you are doing a science claim that, a certain vitamin helps reduce the symptoms of a certain disease, you're definitely going to need to be able to evidence everything, have your right references and cite the correct information. But finding those details could be very difficult. You also want to make sure that you're organizing your actual writing. So we've talked about editorial calendars. We've talked about how to store the information on your hard drive. You want to make sure you're storing work in a project-based format. And then you might have some common libraries. So if you're writing health advertisements. You may have a library of PDF files that are primary sources that you found in the past and that you've put someplace. Well, you want to use what's called optical character reading. You want to OCR, make those PDFs text searchable. That way you can start your search next time on your local system. I have a library of almost 2 terabytes of PDF files in the core topic areas that I write about. I just downloaded a Word document on war propaganda that came from an educational institute. And it is a good way to find those primary sources if I was going to write about propaganda or communication styles. So one of the things that we're doing here when we write is we're very often collecting research on the extremes, and then we're narrowing those extremes down as the relevant reason why a customer should take action. If I was doing a course about improving your communications, my extreme would be war propaganda. So why would you want to improve your communications? Well, you want to do that to be more persuasive and advance your career. And here's how governments did it. And here's the wrong way of doing it. And here's what works in a personal situation or a leadership situation. So you would contrast the leaders who are trying to do things to manipulate versus someone who is persuasive in their communications that helps people do what they want to do already and helps them move forward in their life. These contrasts come up, store the information, catalog it, categorize it, keyword match it, and then now you don't have to go back out on the internet to find anything. Because again, the internet becomes a huge distraction. It becomes kind of overwhelm for many people. So you're collecting all the websites that you find to be useful for ideas. You're putting them in a feed or a news reader. You're storing documents, primary source documents on a local hard drive or on a network drive that you can search through. Now, how do you approach this information to most effectively use it? Because storing information is one thing. Retrieving it for a useful function is something completely different. In fact, I wrote a whole course on how to organize information for maximum value and use. In this case, you want to start with an outline. Before you do any research, you want to outline your work. So the outline itself is a tool to narrow the scope of your research so that you're now pulling more relevant and useful information into that outline to build out the overall sales letter, the press release, or special report. And by doing this, you're now focusing your work on maybe like a list of questions, an outline about the particular piece of work. You could be using a sales letter format or template. And that's how you get your first draft together. Now, I like to challenge my first drafts with the anti-third party. So if I'm writing a program about how to be more persuasive, I'm going to create a whole list of arguments about why you should not be more persuasive. And I'm going to look at my original draft as if I'm somebody who's completely against persuasion and in fact wants you to be more subservient and wants you to follow the leader. And I use that to build up that antithesis or the antithesis of my original idea so that I can handle objections. So you'll come up with different objections. So this is the part where you're collecting sales letters. You're collecting, if you're writing a pro-democracy piece, then you want to pull communist-related literature. So if you say, it's important for free speech, and your counter argument is that not all speech is important. And so now you can build up that counter argument. It helps you verify the original sources. It helps you validate your argument. It also helps you see the work that you're creating from the perspective of a reader. And then ultimately back as you write your next draft, you're going to have a more substantial piece. At this point, you're not going to the internet to look for more information. You're not going to the library. You literally can take your computer offline, go sit someplace quiet, and simply write from your materials. I'm not going to go into how to structure like your file folders and stuff, but you do need to work from a project-based format. It is a great idea to put your sources in a reference folder inside your project folder so that you have those readily available. And you really do want to package up this information so that you can just go offline. because when you write, you got to really write. You got to focus. You got to think about it. You got to stalk the computer, as John Carlton says. You want to be in a mindset to create the most persuasive, the most valuable content possible. Now, let's say you're finished. You've delivered the project to your client. They have paid you. What do you do next? Well, that folder itself becomes part of your swipe file. It becomes part of your personal library of materials and could even become later ancillary materials like special reports, or you put 5 sales letters you've written for a particular type of product together, and now you've got a really good swipe for a client. Dan Kennedy talks about selling his clients swipes, which was basically 4 or 5 sales letters in that industry, some of them for that particular client, along with commentary about how to write in that format for that audience. So your customer avatars, the psychological analysis of your buyer, or the test results from your A/B splits, put it all in a project folder, and then put that project folder in an archive where you can search it. You want to make sure everything's searchable. Because the ultimate solution is not to be searching for the next content idea, not to be digging around the internet trying to find that next idea, that next concept. You want to be able to produce original materials from primary sources using critical thinking and the emotions of copywriting to persuade the reader to take action. You do this by being organized. You do this by searching rather than just happenstance falling upon stuff. And then when you do fall across something that's interesting, you have a place to put it. If it's an interesting website, you put it in your newsreader. If it's an interesting primary source, you put it in your research library. If it's an interesting sales letter for the same audience, you put that in your marketing swipe file. Does this make sense to you? Does this sound like a more strategic approach to writing copy? I'm in a situation that if I lost the internet for months at a time, I have enough records and past work that I can write on any topic that I've previously written on and have new sources, new information. Are you in a position where if a client says, hey, I love the sales letter you wrote last year, it's getting good conversion, can you write me a test that you'd be able to just do it? See, a lot of copywriters, marketers, business development professionals are doing the same research for different markets all the time. They're doing the same research over and over, starting every project from scratch. Your optimization comes from being able to organize information in a relevant way so that you can recall that information and apply it specifically to the task at hand. You don't need to remember which websites, which resources, which experts, because you're going to start building lists and catalogs and sourcing their materials. I actually have a directory that's basically the names of credible sources, and then inside that directory is every PDF file, scanned documents, letters they sent, everything in there, text searchable, ready to use. Now, I learned a lot of this from the legal profession. I'd be happy to help you consult if you have an agency with more than a few copywriters. I'd be happy to help you optimize your system for writing better copy that sells. But simply getting started, you don't need a lot of fancy tools. Click the link below, ask questions about this. I'll get you a list of the tools that I use. I try to keep it very simple. And ultimately, I'm able to write a lot of stuff quickly. Now, that doesn't mean it's a finished product quickly, but it means I've gotten past the research, I've gotten past the critical review, and now I'm working with a client to finish a piece of work. And that helps you get paid faster, it helps your client get better quality work, and it helps you go to the next level if you decide to take an information publishing route or a consulting route added upon your copywriting. I want to thank you for listening. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. You can visit me at www.adbriefings.co.uk. Send me a letter or fax me with your questions. Your questions are the foundation of future content and how I can be sure to serve your interests as a copywriter, marketer, or business development professional. The Ad Briefings Copywriting Tips newsletter is all about your success as going from a solo to an agency to a high-paid consultant in the area. You may not even thought about that acceleration that's available to you, but there's no reason why you can't be a 6-figure copywriter, a 7-figure agency, or better. I want to thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to your questions. This has been about organizing information, and I got a lot of resources on here available for that. Thanks for listening.